got barbecue back there, and you didn't invite me. Hurt my feelings.
Welcome to episode 280 of Dynasty Theory. I'm joined by John and Dan. Dan, I have a question for you.
Right out of the gates with a question.
I am. So we are starting up because this upcoming week is combine time. How much does this play in part to how much video you watch? I know John's huge into the numbers, so this week is pretty big as far as how his sheets go. How does it work for you as far as watching video, or do you feel like you already kind of have a strong idea what these players are going to do going into this week?
I'd say I have a strong idea, but there's still some I'm uncertain about. Like, the film doesn't necessarily always tell you that straight line 40 speed. I don't get that shuttle run speed, see how officially strong they are with a bench press and all those intangibles, all those things that we'll be looking for in the combine. I'm binge watching as much film as I can. Some of it I'll go back and watch again after the combine as I learn about new players, kind of see, hey, where did I go wrong with this? If a guy maybe didn't test out like I hoped he would. So I think we just keep checking the boxes, gathering as much information as we can this time of year, Mitch, and just super stoked about this combine coming up because it is going to really impact our rankings as we learn more.
All right. So, John, I know you have an idea as far as 40 times and everything. You have I don't know what you call them, just
placeholders.
Placeholders, the best word for it. Yeah. So you have those already put in. How often do you see yourself changing those year after year going into the combine? Are you usually pretty close as far as your rookie prospects go, or do you actually end up seeing a fair amount of change after the combine?
Full transparency. It's not me sitting there watching the game okay, this dude's going to run there. It's going through different sources that, have data, that have their projections, and kind of going off of that. There are several, typically there's more guys that end up being a little bit slower than being faster. Like the ones that stand out, Kyron Williams, Roderick Estime, a little bit slower, but you'll have guys pop every once in a while. But I think for the most part, they get fairly close. It's a good representation. The ones that get interesting for like wide receivers, just don't be super slow. But it's the guys that are projected at that cutoff, 4.5 to 4.6, and then for running back, it's whenever you start to get into that cusp of the height and weight combo that then reflects in the speed score, because that's something that goes into what I'm looking at. It's a little bit more correlated for running backs than it is wide receivers. So I don't want to bore everybody with the behind the scenes stuff, but there is that difference there. And it's those guys that are on the cusp that will get their scores on my end adjusted as a result.
I imagine you both would probably agree. It's not like we're going to see necessarily, there may be some, like JB mentioned, some running backs that gave really disappointing 40 times. That'll come up, but it's not so much the big drops where we have them placed, but I'm probably got a little JB in me and get a little spreadsheet, the spreadsheet nerd comes out, just moving guys up a couple spots because you learn something kind of excites me there, as we're trying to get these rankings as exact as we can for when it's draft time for us in our leagues.
And don't double count. That's a disclaimer to everybody. If you expected somebody to go out there and be fast when they in fact are fast, don't adjust because of it. You already have made that assumption, right?
No, we'll get to the whole community sentiment part of this here shortly. But first, I wanted to say thank you to everyone who listened last week. I asked for more likes and comments. We had over 225 in the last video, over 85 comments. It's truly awesome to see that much. I mean, I could flat out tell you it helps us a lot as far as the algorithm goes when you guys do this, because we had more eyes on the last episode we put out. Please keep doing it. But this is the time to join the DD fantasy football community. You get in the Discord. I guarantee you will be a better dynasty manager and a better player at best ball. Redraft. Whatever you love doing, join now so you can understand these prospects. We're talking about them 24/7 nonstop in the Discord. Join just so you have and I did. I guarantee you, we have, I think, 10 players to talk through today. You probably haven't heard of 2 of them yet, at least. But if you were in the Discord, you would at least know the names. So join the Discord. I guarantee it's going to help you. The Trinity score's in there. The War Tool's going to help you. John's tiers are amazing, and you can only get them if you join up at ddfantasyfootball.com. If you want to save some money, use code Theory. But that's enough of that. Just please like this video and comment. But this show is solely about the combine. And it's about whose value can go up because of having a good time, whether it's good 40, good interviews, their medicals check out. There's many things that go into the combine that teams look at, but more importantly, that the Dynasty community cares about. John brought up don't double count. Guess what? The fantasy community loves double counting. If we know someone's slow when they run slow, see, look, he's so slow, he can't even play in the NFL. Someone's fast, runs an Xavier Worthy time. Look, he's going to be amazing. He's fast, even though we already knew this. But the community loves to do this. And so I think this is just an extremely important show, because I would say there's 10 players, if not more, that if they go out and have a good time or a bad time, the Dynasty community will either love them or kill them. And I think teams play in part this, but we already know that there are teams who just don't go to the combine because they could get most of this stuff, emailed from their PFF or whoever is doing the miles per hour data in college. So moving on, we only have one quarterback, and it's because I think we all are pretty firm on what we feel about Sanders and Cam Ward and whatever even if they throw, they don't throw. I don't think we're going to see a lot of change. But the quarterback 3, there's still some I'd say hype there that he can move into the top 20 picks the first round. I'll say Jaxson Dart was a guy that I flat out loved as a very late round, early second round rookie draft pick. Even you could look at that NFL wise, or you can look at that Dynasty mock draft wise, as far as like if you get him to the 201, like his what his ceiling can be there. If he goes in the top 20 because he has a good combine, Dan, all of a sudden you're talking about the 106 in rookie drafts. How do you feel about Jaxson Dart if he does show out here at the combine?
I think it's part of that quarterback puzzle that we're trying to figure out. I took some time digging today, looking at what teams have openings, what quarterbacks can move. And all these teams right now are evaluating, hey, what's the best route to go to build our roster? Is it that rookie quarterback outside of Ward and Sanders? And really, Dart's the guy. I think Milroe and Quinn Ewers have some potential to, also show out in the combine and maybe kind of play into this equation. But Jaxson Dart's the one guy that, to me, is in a cluster of Sam Darnold. Hey, who is it in Pittsburgh, Fields or Wilson? Where's Aaron Rodgers going? Could Kirk Cousins or a wild card Jameis Winston find a home? There's only like 5 chairs and only a couple more quarterbacks than those 5, which made me think today, those free agent quarterbacks that may or may not get a job, throw Danny Dimes in that list. These are the guys I think you want to, if you could get them thrown in or on the cheap in Dynasty trades, even if they don't land a starting job, you probably got one of the best backups in Dynasty. And we know that kind of becomes into strategy later. But specific to Jaxson Dart, he's got NFL traits. He could get us some rushing yards. He's maybe like a poor man's Bo Nix if we're looking at Dynasty value compared to, to last year's draft. But where he lands in that equation of quarterbacks is going to be the difference of where he moves up in our Dynasty first round for me. Needs to really look good in shorts and a t-shirt, guys, and win those meeting rooms over in Indy.
Yeah, it's so important for quarterbacks. It's like we've seen the videos come out. Who was it? Was it Jaden last year who everyone didn't like something that he said doing like the whiteboard for the Giants or something? I can't remember. They asked him a question and they were like, hey, what would you do in the scenario? And he's like, I'd throw a touchdown. And there was people in the Dynasty community being like, oh, so he doesn't even know what to do. So it shows just how much these little things can change how the Dynasty community looks at someone. John, Jaxson Dart, do you like him at the 106 in rookie drafts? Let's say he goes top 20 in the NFL. Do you like him 106 through 108? Because I really loved him as an early second round a Dynasty rookie pick. I'm not sure I like him so much as the 107, 108 over some of the running backs in this class.
He would need to go a little bit later in rookie drafts for me to have a decent exposure to him. And Jaxson Dart, he's somebody that I want to talk about because Dan already mentioned it. I think with quarterbacks that are not kind of locked in to be top 5 or top 10 picks. So we talk about Shedeur Sanders, we talk about Cam Ward. It doesn't really matter what they do. I mean, sure, if they go in and their interviews, like, I don't even know if a terrible interview is going to keep guys out of the top 10. But when you get into this Jaxson Dart, Jalen Milroe, Quinn Ewers situation, this territory, if you will, where they certainly could move up, they could drop, the meeting room, the interviews, that's going to be critical for a guy like Jaxson Dart. You know, I think the on-field stuff, sure, he can show off some of his athleticism. Over the last 3 years at Ole Miss, he put up 1,500 rushing yards combined. I think we're going to see a lot of people still have that bad taste of Matt Corral in their mouth. You know, looking at Ole Miss, if we're going to helmet scout, which I know several people do still out in the Dynasty community, he's not going to give you, you know, we talk about the athleticism, but he's not going to give you blazing speed. Like it by any means, but he's mobile enough. Went to the Senior Bowl, seemed like his stock was rising as a result. The things that he was doing, whether it was in practice or the game, but the interviews for Jaxson Dart, like if we get a scout that comes out and says, wow, like there's somebody that really, and it's always going to be an anonymous scout or an anonymous GM, an anonymous executive from the NFC, you know, Jaxson Dart really impressed us in the interviews. Like, I think this kid, blah, blah, blah. We're going to see that reflected in his dynasty value. We're going to see that gap close a little bit between Jaxson Dart and those first two quarterbacks that are going off the board. And sure, there's already some X accounts, some things on Reddit. It's like, hey, a lot of teams might have Jaxson Dart as their quarterback too right now. And that's easy to say if you are a team that isn't going to be able to get the top two quarterbacks. But I think the combine is going to be very important for a player like Jaxson Dart. But again, I don't think it's necessarily what we're going to see on the field during these different events. And like Dan said, how's he going to look in shorts and a t-shirt? But those interviews are going to be critical. And this is where I was putting on my Coach Dan hat, thinking, as a coach, how important it is for a leader of your team, a leader of your offense, to show out in those interview rooms.
I'd like to add, I think we're setting up for the rest of the show. I think the importance of staying plugged into the DD fantasy community, and the casual fantasy football player sees those stats that Mitch put up on the screen there. They look awesome, right? They look great. And, you know, JB, you mentioned that, you know, random X account that talked about some anonymous person said he was really good here. And that's all that casual fan sees, and they're automatically draft them real high. Well, we'll be grinding all the way through. You know, you had like Ray, who was out in the Senior Bowl interviewing, getting to know some of these guys. You guys are going to be dissecting the spreadsheets. I'm looking for the anonymous coming from a good source and getting some coaching background into it. So I think you stay plugged in. We're going to have a really good idea where Jaxson Dart's going to go come draft day. And Mitch, you are totally on mute, brother.
Oh, you're on mute, buddy.
I've been on mute for, well, see, here's what happened. John started talking and I'm like, I'm going to look up something real quick. And I knew I had time. Like I looked it up and I've been done for 3 minutes when I Googled and I just forgot to unclick the button. So that's my fault. But what I was just saying was Jaxson Dart, he could end up having that CJ Stroud type on the field workout if he throws, and then maybe we'll see something there. It's 40 time, doesn't matter. None of that other stuff matters. Now for the guy that we're going to get to, Cam Skattebo, it matters. And that's the thing. Dan, so John and I, we had back probably 5 weeks ago, we had on Trending Fantasy, the top 5 running backs coming into the draft class show. Got hammered because we didn't have Cam Skattebo in there. Skattebo, sorry. Have to remember, Skattebo, not Bo. And then we just recently, for anyone who wants to know, we just recently had the full top 10, kind of how we look at it going into the combine, the top 10 running backs on trending. We didn't get a lot of comments about Cam Skattebo this time. There was like very little talk about him. But if you put out a show 5 weeks ago or in December and you talked about college running backs, everyone's like, how's this dude not in your top 5? How's this dude not in your top 3? But the NFL does not seem to love this dude as much as what the Dynasty community did. So I know you're coming in not late. I mean, you're fully up to date now on all these prospects, but you didn't have to hear all that December, early January talk about like, oh, you guys are dumb for not knowing more about this guy. How do you feel about him going in? And do you think a fast 40 time could boost his value as far as the NFL goes? Because I know it'll help as far as the Dynasty community goes.
I think he definitely needs it. I do think it's a deep class. I feel bad for you guys taking some heat for not being in your top 5 when he doesn't deserve to be there. But that goes to the point of that casual fan again. I have him 10th right now. He's my 10th running back, and that's where the combine comes in. Could he bump up a little bit? He looks smaller on film than I think he actually is. I think I have like 5'11", 216. I'm looking forward to the combine measurements to know if he's really 5'11", or if that's just like what they put in the program to make it look good. He's also 23 years of age. I know we like our backs a little bit younger, so I'm trying not to hold some things against him. He's a tough back. He's versatile. He could catch. I just feel like he lacks that true NFL size and speed and athleticism come into question here, and that's why he's 10th compared to this loaded class right now. So, I'm going to be looking for the 40. I'm going to be looking for a short shuttle. But I'm envisioning him as a player in the NFL that he's like has a role on NFL teams, and he's that bench player on our dynasty rosters that we will occasionally play when the situation presents himself, injuries, or he has a certain role certain weeks, and he's just talented enough to get a couple catches and maybe find the end zone. But for as much hype as there is, I'm not there.
John, he hits literally everything from the analytical standpoint. Like everything you could hope for, he hits it. If he goes out and runs a 4.6, where will he be ranked as far as top 10 goes?
Right now, the expectation is that he is going to run around a 4.6. Mm-hmm. That's kind of the placeholder that I have in for him right now. That's the baseline. That's the expectation. So if he goes out and runs a 4.6, he's really not going to change too much for me, because he does have those other traits that I think are desirable. He's that bruising back that can and should be used in the receiving game. But I'm looking like if he lands in between that 4.6 to 4.65, you look at the running backs that the receiving work wasn't necessarily there, and we're looking at the range of outcomes from a draft capital standpoint. I still think he could land late day 2 in the NFL draft, but we're looking at like again at 4.63, David Montgomery. Is he going to give you a David Montgomery type career? Probably not. Zach Moss, 4.65. I think that's a decent comp from an analytical perspective, and then within the range of outcomes. And then Tyler Algier ran a 4.6. He went day 3 in the NFL draft, but based on certain things within their collegiate profiles from an analytical perspective and the potential range in 40 time, that's kind of where I think he lands. I think David Montgomery, ceiling of ceilings for him. Zach Moss, Tyler Algier, probably a more realistic range of outcomes. So for me, I that 7 to 10 range right now on Fantasy Calc, and this is a big asterisk because Fantasy Calc, they just released their rookies recently, but if you're on Fantasy Calc, he's slated in at that 206 spot in 12-team Superflex drafts, and I think that's kind of where I am, but I have a decent sized tier there. We talk about it. It's that recency bias, right? People saw him play for the first time really against Texas in the playoffs. Then he doesn't take part in the Senior Bowl, even though he was invited, and people kind of forget about him again. So it's very cyclical. has its ebbs and flows in terms of the flavor of the week, as I've referred to him. But I'm going to say, like, right now in that 205 to 209 range with an Ollie Gordon, with a Devin Neal, with a player like Alec Iamaner, if we're looking cross positionally. So that's where I am today.
Having not spent a lot of time, or maybe as much time as needed in the JB spreadsheets yet, I get more into them after the draft, or after the combine. I mean, JB, are you dinging him for age? Like, 23, like you talk about Montgomery, he was like, the speed might be similar, but he was a younger back, where here's Cam maxing out his senior year. Talent's about to get a lot better.
There certainly is an adjustment. And this is one thing that Mitch and I don't want to say butt heads, but he looks at things from how old are you when the season starts? In the spreadsheet, I have draft age. So slight variance, but you look at the running backs that are coming out at the age of 20, 21, even 22, there's a certain calibration, if you will. When you get to the age of 23, there is a difference, but it's not to say it's a death sentence, right? You can't completely write these players off, especially because over recent years, ever since COVID, we start to get more eligibility granted. We get the NIL money involved. So I think you're going to see players, the difference between 23-year-old running backs 10 years ago that were coming out versus 23-year-old running backs coming out today. I think there's going to be a little bit of a difference, but you look at high-end ceiling, there aren't that many running backs coming out since 2003. That's my year. That's a magical year in my running back sheet, but there aren't that many running backs to look at and say, wow, the ceiling was just tremendous with these guys. So a little bit is the short answer.
Yeah, I think a little bit of a 23-year-old going up against some 18, 19-year-olds, like, he's learned a lot more. And when you got the heart and effort that kid has, that can inflate 1,711 yards a little bit.
All I'm going to say about this whole age thing, be willing to do it for all prospects, just not ones that you might not like as much. That's all I'm saying. It's all I'm saying. There are players to where we will be like, oh, it's different for this reason. But if you don't, exactly. I mean, that is like a perfect example, right? We will talk about Trey Harris later, but he's someone will be like, yeah, but we're able to overlook it for whatever reason. But since, Skattebo is coming out and it's, we might not love him. It's like, well, he's 23, so he's going to be a little bit further down my board. But I want to bring up who I honestly believe, John talked about him 3 weeks ago in a mock draft. Dan, you brought him up in the group chat. Ollie Gordon, I believe, can see the most dynasty value change depending on how this week goes for him more than any running back in the draft class. Because I believe he has enough talent to be right up there with Caleb Johnson, Travion Henderson, running back 3 or 4, however you look at it. If he comes out and doesn't run great, you could see him as a Dylan Sampson, running back 8, running back 9 kind of prospect. For anyone who was a little bit late this year, he had a terrible 24 season. Awful. 23, he was fantastic. I think he finished 6th or 7th in Heisman voting. Like, he was great at Oklahoma State back in 23. 24 was terrible. He lost me fair amount of money on prop picks, but I'm willing to overlook this. John, you brought him up early. Is it because he popped in your sheets early and you're willing to overlook kind of that 24 season, since you can kind of look at his best career marks instead of what he did on the field just this past season?
Yes. Because you still look at average, you still look at the athletic profile, you still look at the size of these backs. And yeah, like you look at college dominator for, receiving, like, what was he able to do previously? And this is for any prospect, but like college dominator, final season, best season when you're looking at yards and touchdowns, whether it's rushing, receiving, or scrimmage. So if a player popped their first 2 seasons and then even fizzled off and they had a very poor final season, the best is going to be able to pull that up. but there's always players that will pop on these from an analytical perspective, like different situation because of the injury concerns and the medicals. But like Sean Tucker, he stood out above a ton of running backs pre-draft for me because of what he was able to do production wise. So it certainly has its pros and cons when you're looking at it in this way. But Ollie Gordon, I think he's an early day 3 pick right now. He's going 205 on Fantasy Calc. In the Senior Bowl, he came in 6'1", 233.
Huge.
Big boy. Now, if he comes out and my placeholder for him is 4.45, that would put him probably 1 or 2 when you look at weight adjusted speed score. Now, when he comes out and runs a 4.46, that's the one that's like, oh, come on. But I think Ollie Gordon in these on-field workouts here, he can do a lot of things to really stand out because, again, I always talk about the baseline with players, whether they're rookies, whether they're in the NFL already. People remember what Ollie Gordon did in 2023. He has that name recognition that even casual Dynasty players probably know who Ollie Gordon is if they pay a little bit of attention. So if now they're watching the combine and he comes out at his size and puts up a sub 4.5, it's going to raise some eyebrows for people. I think that's why I had him as a player that can really elevate himself this week.
I agree with JB, but I have to say, Mitch, did you just notice how much he was just glowing when the potential to move up his spreadsheets were there and just break the analytical model there? Like only Mrs. Bauer gets those looks. Like that was a special glow. We got to note that one. But yeah, JB, I'm with you, man. Fort Worth, Texas running back there, man. They running backs are good in Texas. They're real. He is a big power back. Yeah, I'm just hoping for good medicals and a 40 time to match, as you mentioned. I think this is one of my most favorite pieces of playing Dynasty football, whether it's talking about rookie players as we are right now, or even in a regular draft, like just the veterans, to be able to see through the weeds of a guy's situation because health and like the O-line and do you have a passing game? It fluctuates so much. So if we could just see through that and he could come through with a good physical and a pretty good 40 time. I know our guy, Ray Garvin, I'll mention him twice in this pod. This is the second one. He seems to really be on the train as his YouTube video is pulling up very high on the Google searches. He gave a pretty cool comp to my boy number 27, Larry Johnson. I got a little bit of Leonard Fournette feels in watching him, and you guys know I love Lenny. So to me, he's one of the most intriguing guys going into the combine. I'm excited. I now know JB's going to be there clocking from his couch there, hoping he could break the analytical model. But surprisingly, he's nobody's top 5 in the 4-letter network. So where's he going to land is a big question.
Yeah, I think that'll be super interesting because he was always on the cusp, but I do think he's the guy that could break into it, right? John, you brought up someone else who wasn't even on our top 10 running back show. But yeah, I think this is one of the guys that Dan had a little bit of pushback in the comments. For anyone, like you can't see our comments, but a lot of times I'll bring up a show topic and these guys are like, great, there's no talk until showtime. Like this whole weekend has been like, why are we talking about this guy or this guy? So I'm just going to guess, Dan, this was one of the guys that you were bringing up. Bhayshul. I want to make sure I get his name right. Bhayshul Tuten, Virginia Tech.
Tuten.
Yeah, he's actually been good going back to a sophomore season there. He looks really good. But you didn't one time have any pushback on me when I didn't list him in the top 10 on our running back show. But do you think he could climb in the top 10?
Yes. But again, that like 8 through 12-ish, like it's a big clump right now.
Is he going to take himself out of that clump?
I believe there are going to be more people talking about him in the top 10 because of the NFL Combine. Right now, he's going 403 on Fantasy Calc. This dude, I think he's going to have the fastest 40 times of all of the running backs here at the NFL Combine. You know, I said Scootin' Tuten, he's going to be moving. 5'9", 211, 22 years old, took part in the Senior Bowl. I think he's going to get the early day 3 draft capital. But again, just name recognition alone, he doesn't have it. And I know, like, yes, he has the 23 receptions this year. He did a little bit better in 2023 from a yardage perspective. He does, it's not a lot of downfield receiving opportunities for him. He's involved in the screen game. But when this dude gets the ball, look out. I think he's gonna be sub 4.35. And I don't know what the props are on it. And if I were a gambling man, I think many people know that I like to venture down that road. All right. I would say that Tuten is sub 4.35. And just from an analytical perspective, ignoring draft capital, he's coming in he's coming in my model. All right. At running back 9. Okay.
That just sounded X-rated, just for the record. But anyway.
Oh, you did, Dan.
When I'm talking about the sheets, you don't know what's happening.
It's fair. Okay. Hey, well, let's take the name off. Let's take the graphic off. I'm going to tell you, Dan, that we're going to have a running back prospect who's going to run a 4.35 in the draft. It's been a starter for a while, but he has 23 receptions, which is great, but he got 81 yards off of those receptions. So, well, what does that say to you as far as the prospect goes? Just taking the name off, just having some fun with it. I don't know how it's possible.
Can we talk about his 239 receiving yards last year?
That's not fun, John. We want to talk about this right now.
We have different definitions of fun, for the record.
To Mitch's point, something's not adding up there for sure. But I have so many thoughts. And before I get to your rootin' tootin' boy here, let me ask this one question, because it's on my mind as we're going through the running backs. With the depth of the running backs, are we more inclined to invest in a 4th or 5th round running back this year than in the past? Like, we've been really strict. JB, I know you've got some good numbers. Mitch has verified this. Like, there's been a cutoff for us historically. Does that change this year with the amount of depth we have? Because, like, I know JB, you're a little ambitious there with his speed for where he's going. Some guys are going to slide. There's too many other team needs for all these running backs to get dumped into the first 4 rounds. Just no way. Yeah. Even guys we like higher than this guy are not going to probably make the first 3 rounds.
I mean, you look at things recently. Chase Brown, he went in the 5th round. Tyrone Tracy went in the 5th round. These are guys that have improved their dynasty stock just over the last couple seasons. And then going even a little bit further back, Kyron Williams went in the 5th round, but he slipped because of his 40 time. Isaiah Pacheco, a 7th round player. Ramondre Stevenson, 4th round. So we have guys that I think we are being, there still is that difference between day 2 and day 3. But I think there's more of a split now between 2nd and 3rd round. So that 3rd round, it's a little bit closer to early mid day 3 draft capital than what we have previously seen. But part of that is because the NFL, they're not taking as many backs in the first round and spending those premium picks, even though we just saw Bijan Robinson G-Bar. Jahmyr Gibbs getting tongue-tied over. Guys, I don't know if you can see it in my glasses, but I'm looking at the sheets over here. I'm getting all hot and bothered. I may have to seek immediate medical attention here rather than later. But, no, like, that's why we're talking. Like, he's going in the 4th round right now, according to value. But I think he's going to elevate himself up to middle of the 3rd potential here, and I could see him being a guy that I'm willing to spend those picks on.
So let me build on this, and I'll give you my thoughts on Tuten. And for our listeners, Mitch mentioned our Discord conversation as we're leading up to the show, and you could have interpreted it a couple ways. It's like an email. Sometimes our words aren't truly conveyed in email, and if you didn't know the 3 of us, we wouldn't know if we're either mad at each other or if we really, just
you would think the 3 of us
email.
hated each other, to be honest with you.
But it was funny, but no challenge flag here on Tuten for the reasons that JB mentioned of. The running back position, there are some guys that went later in recent years, the Tyrone Tracy types that hey, you might catch something in a running back. Because it is the running back position, I wouldn't rule it out. So I could see where JB would put him on this list and say, hey, here's a guy we could catch later in our drafts that could end up returning a good value, and he could help himself with a good combine to get there. He's a tough kid out of New Jersey with speed. He's got a nose for the end zone. Again, not as attractive as the other running backs we're looking today, but if he's put together a good college career. He returns kicks. There's going to be some value there for NFL teams to draft him as well, to separate maybe from some other running backs. So there is value. I wouldn't rule him out. No challenge flag here, Mitch.
All right. So moving on, LeQuint Allen. Kind of like the exact opposite as far as receptions go, because he has 64 for 520, which is honestly, it's amazing as far as like college prospects go. Dan, you have been we'll go with pounding the table for this guy for at least the last 7 days now. So going ahead, do you think he has a realistic chance? Because I will say after running back 6 or 7 this class, I think we could see a fair amount change. So we're talking about, hey, maybe a guy that gets drafted in the mid-3rd round instead of a 5th rounder like a Tyrone Tracy. Do you think LeQuint Allen can go that high?
Do I? Yes. I am trying really hard and digging right now to find out why he isn't thought of in a higher light. The only person that I've seen him in anyone's top 5 anywhere, I think, is Mel Kiper. No one else is even whispering this guy for the most part. Couple little whispers after the Senior Bowl. I think he showed out well there. Guys, he's going to be 21. He's not 21 yet. He's only 20. 6 foot 207. He added a few pounds of muscle. They noted at the Senior Bowl from the season. He's an athletic all-purpose back. 1,000-yard seasons declared after his junior year here. He's the all-time Syracuse leading receiving running back, as you noted there, Mitch. Like this, we love that in fantasy, don't we? Guys that could catch like that. He could block. He impressed everybody at the Senior Bowl with his blocking, so you don't want to take him off the field for that. Maybe he's not as dirty runner as like the upper echelon of this draft. So I could see maybe I could see where he's not with our top 5, top 4 maybe, but I could really see him shooting the 5th or 6th running back in this draft. And to me, that should be talked about a lot more. Instead, we're talking about the Cams and all these other guys that have potential. And I'm like, why isn't anyone talking about LeQuint Allen? I just thoroughly loved his film. And I'm trying to figure out, please, after the show, when you are in that chat, if you're a nerd like JB is in his spreadsheets, man, let me know what you think of this guy. I am super curious.
But John, you did have some pushback when Dan first mentioned him. Listen, there's some hedging. I can already see the hedgers coming out. There's going to be some straddling of a fence post here.
There is some hedging here because I would be a hypocrite to sit here and talk up Scootin Tuten, even though he's going to be blazing speed. But LeQuint Allen, he certainly has analytical traits that I love personally for any prospect. Like I always say, I want my backs that can catch passes. And I know Bhayshul Tuten, like he's putting up 80 receiving yards a season. That's just sexy. But it's really sexy. Almost 525 receiving yards from LeQuint Allen. Like you look at the market share, reception market share, his max, like it's right below Ashton Genty, number 2 of all the notable guys in this class. And there are a lot of things to really like. I think he's going to be a guy too that is a late day 3 pick. Maybe he's the one. Like there's always that running back or wide receiver that goes and I'm like, like I wasn't expecting, like we'll get to the small guys in a little bit, but like when Tutu Atwell went in the 2nd round of the NFL draft, I was like, that's interesting. Velus Jones at wide receiver. I don't want to stick with too many receivers, but he went in the 3rd round of the NFL draft. And like, I will say from an analytical perspective, LeQuint Allen and Bhayshul Tuten, like their names are touching. From, I said Tuten was 9, Allen at 10, from ignoring draft capital. Now, if he can elevate himself and he's not that late day 3 pick, and hopefully he has an opportunity to show out here at the NFL Combine, he can elevate himself. So I I don't want to say, I don't want to completely brush aside any hope and expectations that Dan may have. Like I can see the hype could be warranted. And then my thought is
so not what you were saying in the group chat 5 days ago.
My thought is that, listen,
he came around after some further studying.
But if he like 4.55 40, that's my placeholder here. So we'll see.
Honestly, at 6 foot, 200 pounds, he better be that quick. Like if he comes around and runs like a low 4.5, that's kind of what you're hoping to not happen with the running backs of this stature.
His speed score, at 4.55, his speed score would be the lowest of all the running backs I have here. I'm sure there would be scrubs that are going in having a lower speed score, but.
And I think for his size, I think what I'm looking to see at the combine too is, hey, the 40, please be in the pack. You may not be the fastest, but be in the pack. We know running backs, we're not looking for wide receiver speed necessarily, but that short shuttle run needs to be good. That bench press can't be like, only 5 reps at 2 1/4. Like you need to be a strong dude for your size. So hopefully we see all those other things. And he's a guy that just, similar to past years, there's that guy that pops on film like a Ramondre Stevenson. I'm like, hey, there's something there. And that's just what I saw in film. He just looked like one of those guys that could be something that people aren't talking about as much.
So, Dan, you wanted to talk up Trey Harris. Now, here was my pushback on bringing him up, because anyone who's watched John and I's top 10 wide receiver show that came out last week on this channel, please check it out. We both have him as wide receiver 5. We've had him from wide receiver 5 back when we did the top 5 wide receiver show. Do you think there's hope that he could break in higher than that, like going ahead of Igbuka? But my worry is not worry. I just think he's locked in as the wide receiver 5. Like, I don't think he could probably run fast enough to boost himself up. So I'm not sure how much value he could really gain as far as the combine goes. I think there's a chance he could drop if he runs slow. But at 23 years old, played great at Louisiana Tech, didn't miss a beat moving up to the SEC. He's a guy that I love. So I'm all about talking about him. I just don't know how much his value can go up based off the combine.
And it may not. I'm not here beating the drums like I am LeQuint and Allen for whatever reason. But he was a guy that, we talk about guys that could potentially utilize the combine to springboard himself. To me, he kind of felt like in an Ollie Gordon category, where there was a point in time where we were so high on this kid and it just fell off and some people passed them out. But I watched the game film and he still looks really good. Like he just, looking at my notes, he's got that good size. He's got the speed size combo. For his size, he could run. He's got hands. He's got yards after the catch. I think if he could just show out a bit at the combine, he could put himself in that category of a really nice draft situation. Maybe he's not in there with like Burden or Golden, but he's a different kind of receiver too. And I think there's teams that say, hey, I need a Trey Harris type of receiver, and his draft status could go up. So he's just someone that I think kind of fell off, that I feel with a good show, good show out, that he could put himself in a good position and maybe pass one of those guys that we're a little bit higher on right now.
Now, Dan, he is 23 years old, though.
Okay, now here's where I'm going to go with that. So, and I said it before. I set you up for this one here, okay? I think there's a difference, and this is just a true talented dude that stood in college later versus Cam. I think he capped out because of his age. I think there's more of a ceiling there for Trey Harris. But to your point of still being 23, hey, if we're comparing apples for apples and there's another receiver that's just as good as 21, and he's rated for the NFL at 21, he's going to go higher. So I say, Mitch, you're right in your point before of, hey, just be mindful of it for everybody. But I think there are two different kinds of 23 here, of the production that Trey Harris could have in the NFL for our dynasty rosters versus the dynasty production that Cam's probably going to give us, unless we're surprised.
John, Dan brought up a great point that wide receivers aren't looked at as like, hey, all these guys are wide receivers. They're all, hey, this guy could be a Z, this guy could be a slot, this guy's an X, this guy could play everything. Trey Harris is one of those guys who could probably play everything. How do you look at him as far as, can he get into that top 3 scenario? Well, let's say he goes out and shows out. What happens if he runs a 4.42? His 3-cone's amazing. He does really well on the, I'm trying to think of the name of the drill where they run down the line and catch the ball. Yeah, the gauntlet. If he runs really good doing that, can he boost his stock? Because I think his floor is amazing. He's a guy that I plan on having a lot of rostership of once rookie drafts happen. How high is his ceiling?
If we're talking strictly from a riser perspective as a result of the NFL Combine, I tend to agree with you. I think it's going to be difficult for him to climb out of like that wide receiver 5 spot. Now, the Travis Hunter discussion, that's a different beast. Like I know you with the assumption if he were to play more wide receiver, you and a lot of people are higher on him. I have Trey Harris as my wide receiver 4.
Yeah,
right
sorry.
now.
I should have said that. It's all depending on Trey Harris. I mean, Trey Harris.
Well, I mean, I know what you're saying, Travis Hunter, but it does depend on Trey Harris. If Trey Harris, like my 4.55, I think that's reasonable. He's not going to be the necessarily be a speedster, but like going back to the age thing, yeah, he's 23, but he broke out at a very high level on a per game basis at the age of 20. You know, he didn't miss a beat, like you said, going to Ole Miss. He is not an early declare, but that kind of goes back to the comment I had earlier with the way the game is changing at the collegiate level, especially since COVID and just these players being in college a little bit longer. But also there's only 7 early declare wide receivers this year. And no, Trey Harris is not one of them. The thing with Trey Harris, I think if push comes to shove and people have to make the decision between Emeka Egbuka and Trey Harris, they would probably go Egbuka. The name recognition, what Egbuka was able to do at Ohio State at such a young age and, really stood out. And then obviously he kind of came back down to earth, especially in 23, but even a little bit in 2024. But Trey Harris, like, maybe he goes from wide receiver 4 to wide receiver 3, but if he just does something incredible in that 40, that's what people are going to remember. But I also think Egbuka is going to show out in the 40. So
I say this,
kind of where my
JB, I'd even add for Mitch here, who likes Trey Harris, and I see why. What if we go the opposite end of the spectrum? He has a good combine, maybe doesn't light it up to be the best. Still, maybe he's the 6th, 7th receiver in this class after the draft. He could still be very darn good in the National Football League.
100%.
There is a lot of open spots for competition in the NFL at wide receiver. I mean, I just look at the drop off from 1s to 2s in the NFL, and I'm going through my rankings. I'm trying to cut all this dead weight off there at the wide receiver position. I mean, that's a position that thins out really quick. So even if he doesn't get to that top 5, Mitch, I think you can still draft him in Dynasty and might end up with a gem. It's the intangibles in the situation that might rise.
He's a big play machine waiting to happen.
You have Trey Harris, Jalen Royals is this guy for me. Alec Iomanner is another guy who I think could be that prototype to where they can take over an NFL team wide receiver core. Now, the next guy we're going to talk about, back in December, if you were talking about a Texas wide receiver who was going to go in the first round, everyone brought up Isaiah Bond. It's just what everyone talked about. And now in the last, I would say 6 to 8 weeks, now you just flip him and Matthew Golden. You flip them. Now Isaiah Bond is, hey, maybe he's wide receiver 10. Matthew Golden's, as far as NFL goes, wide receiver 6, somewhere around there. But with Isaiah Bond, I am so trying to buy into him because I do love the speedsters. I love the Jameson Williams. I love the Xavier Worthies. I think Isaiah Bond is going to be that kind of speed guy. But his on-the-field production at Texas leaves so much wanting, even going back to Alabama, right? I'm trying to buy into it. John, you wanted to bring him up. Can he really gain, or is he going to be the guy that runs fast that everyone's like double count?
This is strictly the only reason I wanted to bring him up. I am very low on Isaiah Bond. I doubt I have many shares of him when it's all said and done, but one of only 7 early declares at the wide receiver position. I think he gets that mid day 2 draft capital, late second, early third. But right now he's 208 on Fantasy Calc. And I think a lot of people share that overall sentiment. Like Isaiah Bond he's a hated Dynasty asset right now. He really is. He's going to go out and he's going to have a very nice speed at the combine. And as a result, I do think it's going to be double counted. Do I think he elevates himself up to top 10 pick in super flex drafts? Absolutely not. But I do think just strictly because of his speed, there's going to be that little bit of excitement that goes back into that name of Isaiah Bond. Again, I want nothing to do with him. But if we're talking about a riser show from the NFL Combine, I do think Isaiah Bond is going to get a little bit of hype. So if we're looking at him on Fantasy Calc today at 208, I'm going to mark this down. I want to see in 2 weeks where he is. Watch, he'll be like 407. I want to see in 2 weeks where he is, because I do think he's going to elevate himself a little bit. But as a result, this is kind of the spin I'm looking at for Isaiah Bond. He's going to push some guys that I like a little bit further down. So come on, Isaiah.
And if he
runs that fast 40 time.
Sorry, Dan, if he runs a 4.25, do you care as far as your rookie picks go? As far as, are you going to draft him on your dynasty rosters?
I think so, because I think there's a little bit of Xavier Worthy there where you got a good receiver. Yeah, things didn't kind of pan out like we hoped in Texas this year, and he became the number 2 receiver there instead of the number 1. But Quinn Ewers didn't actually have the year we anticipated for either. So it's just an offense that didn't do as much as we hoped that offense would do. He just turned 21. He's the youngest in his class. So I think there's an age thing there that I like too, that shows, hey, there's room for this kid to grow and develop. If he crushes that 40 as a coach, you just can't teach speed. He's, Alabama and Texas, highly coveted by 2 huge schools. Reminds me a little bit of Jermaine Burton last year, but without the off-field stuff. Hopefully without the off-field stuff. So you give me a young kid that doesn't have the off-field challenges and just crushes a 40 and shows out, catches a lot of balls at the combine. He will move up a little bit. I mean, I think I have him. It's like a tie here, like 8, 9, 10. Like these guys are really close, Mitch. I think I had him a couple spots higher than where your top 10 rankings were, but it's close.
And look, Xavier Worthy broke out as a freshman. He almost put up 1,000 yards as a freshman.
Yeah. Well, Worthy's a flat stud. That's the thing. And Isaiah Bond can hope to become Worthy.
Don't mention Isaiah Bond and Xavier Worthy in the same sentence, unless you're saying here's 2 wide receivers that went to Texas.
Well, Dan, you brought up speed kills, and this is someone who I don't want any backtracking now. Like, stay firm on this. You were saying you're out of the Tutu Atwell category. John, I know, has this guy as his wide receiver 10. Like, I don't care if Tez Johnson out of Oregon, who was 5'9", 165 on a perfect day. I don't care if he comes out and runs like a 4.18, runs the gauntlet perfect, has the best 3-cone in history. I don't draft 5'9" guys who might be 165 in the NFL. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, my son's already taller than him at age 14, and we're projecting a little bit higher here. 5'9", 165. That's just not cutting it. And he's almost 23 years of age, so he's not even a young pup yet. Like he should be filled out by 23. Yes, he's a Ducks playmaker, so I get that, JB. He does got some speed. Maybe a team could scheme him open here or there. But if we haven't learned by now from the Tutu Atwells and the Jalen Dardens, is Pop Douglas the ceiling? So maybe there's a role for him on an NFL team. I'm not sure. But I've just learned too much from history. This small guy is so far off the radar, JB. Let me see. Am I taking him in a 4th-round rookie draft? Maybe, so somewhere later. But I'm out.
All right, John, talk up this 4th-rounder UDFA stalwart that you have as wide receiver 10.
Talk up. So currently on Fantasy Calc at 302, you look at some of the undersized wide receivers. Mitch, I know you're a big BMI guy. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But
just depends what I'm feeling about the prospect.
Now, listen, 156 pounds, that's super light. That's super light. No, I I was going to go a direction with this comment here, but we'll ignore that.
We'll keep going.
But like, yeah, they got like 9 to 10 pounds on him, but Tank Dell, Xavier Worthy, Devontae Smith. Am I saying Tez Johnson is any of those guys? No, but there have been wide receivers that have either had some success or at least carried some dynasty value. This is not a Tutu Atwell. It's not a Jalen Darden, a Calvin Austin, a Jacob Cowing. This is somebody that is produced. And when I'm looking at the sheets, he is not even in the same category as the Jalen Dardens. Don't let your past mistakes, Dan, rain down on my parade. Okay. Now, again, we're talking about him as a potential riser from the combine. He was at the Senior Bowl. He creates separation. Less than 2% of his targets in 2024 were contested targets. The kid, he's a route running machine. He's going to be sub 4.35. All right. When he runs the 40. Yes, he is super tiny. I get that. But we talk about the gauntlet. I think he's going to show out during that. I'm just saying he's going to rise for people. Just keep an eye out on X, keep an eye out on Reddit, keep an eye out in the DD Fantasy Football Discord community. He is small as shit. I get that.
Yeah, Jalen Darden, John, was 5'8", 174, but he at least caught for 1,190 yards receiving his senior season. It was younger, and he looked twitchy on film. There was like something, like I look for something different on film. Like, what makes this guy look different than someone else I'm watching on film? Darden at least looked different. It didn't pan out. I mean, he's still in the NFL. He's returning punts and gets a couple reps here and there.
He looked different in Conference USA.
But he was twitchy. He was able to do some things at receiver. I don't see that in Tez Johnson. He doesn't look different.
Now he's twitching on the bench. Now he can be twitchy on
typical fast guy.
John, I have a real question as far as the separation goes. Do you care about that stat?
I care about it as long as they're not above 26% on their 27% in their final season. But of course, I'm going to talk up a 2% contested target rate to defend my guy.
I understand. Like, I just think separation is one of those stats that we've tried to talk about as far as fantasy goes, DFS, hey, who's doing really well on a weekly basis in the NFL? And every time I look at it, I'm like, this isn't helping me at all weekly fantasy points per game wise.
If you're looking strictly at like fantasy points per game and contested target rate, it's not like there's a correlation directly between the two. But there are those points of inflection that once you hit that certain threshold, I start to lose a little bit of interest. And then you could sit there and say, well, Nico Collins was one of those guys that had a higher contested target rate. He was over 30%. Terry McLaurin was high, but they're going to win in different ways than Tiny Tez over here.
I mean, is it an Oregon thing there? Like, Troy Franklin was 6'2", 170. He was also very light, but a bit taller. Had 1,000 yards of senior season with Oregon. He flashed a little bit last year, but I have him so low in my dynasty rankings. Like, is Troy Franklin his ceiling? Like, JB, there's just nothing here that says he is going to rise enough in that combine to be dynasty relevant, other than a fourth rounder that you stash on your bench just because you have nobody better.
But he is going to rise in the eyes of the community. I'm telling you, just when people are spitting out their articles, combine winners, Tez Johnson is going to be mentioned. They might be really, really small print because he's so tiny, but he's going to be mentioned.
He might definitely go from the 302 to the 301 minimum. Now, the last guy we're going to talk about, the tight end that I know John really likes. But Dan, I have some pushback here with you on this one. You love hey, dad played in the NFL, so it means this player's going to be good. We're talking about Oronde Gadsden, Syracuse tight end, had a great 24 season, had a great 22 season. Like, he's he profiles as like the new age tight end, 6'4", 250 pounds, can go out, catch a lot of balls. And his dad played for the Miami Dolphins as a wide receiver. Dan, how could you not be in love with him? I'm flat out, I don't understand it.
This is just as much as Ted Johnson. My travel. What is it? Challenge flag is out here. I'm all fired up already just thinking about this. So, I do love the genetics. You bring up a fine point, Mitch. But there's a difference between the dad I remember that it was a stud NFL player, had incredible genes, versus the dad that, no disrespect to the Gadsden family, bless, I hope his son has a wonderful career, and his dad was a good guy. This just comes from a dynasty competitiveness. He's 21, 22, 6'5", 236. Very good athlete at Syracuse. He was a key player for the Syracuse Orangemen, but I'm sorry, Orangemen fans. He will probably be the next Peyton Hendershot in the National Football League. That's what you described, Mitch. That's what he's projecting out to be. Like these guys at 230-some pounds that cannot block. He did good work in the slot, but he's too slow for wide receiver. An NFL team, I think, would rather have a slot wide receiver there. It did allow me to watch more LeQuint and Allen film, so thank you for that, JB, for putting him on the sheet. I got to watch Allen and some good
I got to correct you this time. It's not LeQuinton.
Gotcha. I just want to rename him. I like LeQuinton as the name. Maybe future child. I don't know. But LeQuint Allen, it allowed me to watch some more film. But there's a tight end. I mean, there's no smashing hits like Tyler Warren. There's no ankle breaking plays like Loveland. History tells us we need to be more critical of the tight end position. Look at the state of the tight end position, guys. We talk about this every Dynasty episode when we're looking at the upper echelon of tight ends and the big drop off. This guy's not even going to be in the drop off category. Let me look at my tight end rankings right now here. Like, what's it? I really think he's a Peyton Hendershot. If he exceeds Peyton Hendershot, because JB saw something with it with the glowing eyes of those glasses from those spreadsheets that are popping some numbers right there, does he move up to like
Peyton
AJ Barner, maybe the hopes of an AJ Barner?
Peyton Hendershot ran a 4.840. He is not Peyton Hendershot.
Real quick, let me just say, at the East-West Shrine Bowl, he did weigh in at what I listed, 6'4", 247. I'm just putting that out there.
That's a little thicker in the behind there, Dan.
Just saying, my numbers weren't wrong. Better. I got them off Google. They have to be right.
All right.
Now, again, we're talking right now at 409 on Fantasy Calc. And like this happens every year, though, with a tight end from a value perspective, gaining steam. Albert O came in. He ran the 40 and left.
He turned out great.
But he rose in value.
As a Dynasty community.
Point of the episode, Dan?
But as a Dynasty community, we have to evolve, JP. Yes, we want them to rise, but we also want them to be good. I don't want to just see a guy get talked about because he ran a good 40 time. I want a guy that's going to help our listeners win their Dynasty leagues, and it is not Oronde Gadsden. So I am here today to help the Dynasty Theory community know that other than a fourth-round flyer, you don't want this kid.
38%. Well, we can just talk about averages. Let's just go averages because he started his career as a wide receiver. Excuse me.
But he was too slow to stay there.
4.5. They're hell of a lot faster than a lot of wide receivers that run slower than 4.5.
Too small to play.
23% reception market share.
Too late to be an inline blocker.
24% receiving yard market share. Almost 2 receiving yards per team pass attempt. He was at 2.64 for his max. 30% receiving touchdown market share. Like the kid can play. I'm telling you,
he's a good Syracuse ball player. I agree. He can play well at Syracuse University.
Don't patronize me.
He is a good baller at Syracuse.
Don't patronize me. He's going to
Syracuse is not the National Football League, JB.
And neither is North Texas when you're talking about Jalen Darden, Twitchell.
You're comparing him to Jalen Darden. That should tell you something right there. We're learning.
Not.
This is 2025, not Dynasty Theory 2022. We're advanced. We're evolving, JB.
So
some of us are. Some of us are stuck in the sheets.
This is the kid.
Get out of the sheets. Tell him, Mitch.
409 on Fantasy Calc. He is. I'm telling you. He's going to rise as a result of the NFL Combine.
How high is he rising, John? Call it out now.
He's not going to pass anybody in the tight end rankings here that's worth anything. Like
Who do you have ahead of him?
I have Fannin ahead of him.
Me too.
Lachey out of Iowa, Mitchell Evans, Notre Dame. Even my boy Oscar Delp out of Georgia, I'd rather. Gunnar Helm of Texas, I wouldn't mind. But those guys who I'm still concerned about because they're just in a class of Dawson Knox's and Mike Gesicki's and Tyler Higbee's. And
I didn't know we were going to step into the show today and only talk about first-round caliber players, guys.
But where's he going to rise? He's not rising to the third round. He is not a third round draft pick in Dynasty.
In tight end premium, he will.
Oh, desperation.
Bank
that
it.
has to be desperation.
Bank it.
Where did Brenton Strange go a couple years ago? Was he a third round pick or I don't know?
Well, he elevated himself to the second round of the NFL draft. Riser.
But he's better than this guy. And there's a ceiling there.
But that's why he's going
Brenton
4-9
Strange
on
is a
fantasy
ceiling.
count. I'm not sitting here saying he's going to be a first round rookie pick. I'm not saying he's going to even be a day 2 NFL draft pick, but it's somebody that is going to stand out this week at the NFL Combine. And I think we should just leave it at that because the glasses are off already, boys. Glasses are off.
I just don't see him standing out enough to be worth anything much, like.
And this is
where's he going? Where's he going? What's he rising to?
Okay.
What could he possibly do? I mean, I give him credit. Mitch brought up a good point. He's been having a lot of protein shakes, probably a gallon of chocolate milk a day. He's got himself up to 244. I'm proud of the kid. He's a hard worker and a good college football player. He'll probably get drafted in the 6th round in the NFL draft.
Darren Waller was 236 pounds. Evan Ingram was 234 pounds. Gerald Everett, 239 pounds. These are guys that have, to varying degrees, have been able to produce at the NFL.
Much more robust college careers and an evolving game where those tight ends we're seeing less and less of. Exceptions to the rules. Such a low percentage.
Anyone who's not watching on YouTube is missing John's face, and this is the highlight of my week right here.
Mitch, play the music to sound us off here.
I'm not playing any music, but we do have a final thought, John. We're not skipping it. Dan, for the 280th time before the 2025 NFL Combine, what's your final thought?
Hey, that was fun, first of all. It would be fun if JB and I just agreed on everything there. I knew one of those prospects was going to hit the hot button tonight, and that was the one there at tight end. So that was fun. But countdown to Combine week begins. Players start arriving today and tomorrow. By the time our next show rolls around, rookie rankings will have some good movement. We'll see where some of these guys we talked about today showed out or did not show out. We shall see. But, man, I'm looking forward to, all those bench presses and verticals and 3 cones, meetings, interviews, soaking up as much knowledge as we can. And then the day after, March 4th, is the deadline for the franchise tag. So hopefully we'll start getting a little bit of news there, see if anybody gets tagged on these rosters. And then March 10th to 12th, free agency will be starting to warm up as we lead on to draft day. So keep tuning in. A lot more to talk about.
John.
Oronde Gadsden is going to be.
I could tell he was still worked up. I was waiting for it.
On one episode, somebody said there was a comment on the YouTube video, and it was like, the dude in the middle, this is when I was hosting, the dude in the middle cannot let things go. And I was like, no, I can't. That's the Italian in me. But Oronde Gadsden II is going to be talked about as tight end 4 in this class.
What?
By who?
Who? What?
By people. Talking about people.
By people. Okay,
by people.
So here's my final
Are these the people on Twitter that you bust on all the time that aren't even good analysts that are going to be talking about them? Come on, JB. We deserve better than that.
The same people that are going to be elevating his ADP. Yes. But anyway, my final thoughts. We talk about NFL Combine risers. February 2024, Ladd McConkey, 206, Jalen Wright, 311, Isaac Guerrero, Kamani Vidal, they weren't even talked about. February 23, Devon A. Chan, 206. Sam Laporta was tight end 7 at 5'10 in non-premiums. February 22nd, James Cook, running back 9 at 305. Sky Moore, wide receiver 13 at 304. Tyquan Thornton, nobody was talking about him. Then he elevates himself to the second round in the NFL draft. It's going to be a fun week. We're going to see some reactions. overreactions, and I think when people aren't reacting enough. So buckle up, baby. Buckle up.
Please join the community at ddfantasy.com. Use code Theory. We talk about this all the time. This is how the Discord is. It is so much fun. But if you want a startup draft, there's one happening every single week. People are always starting new startups in there. If you need rookie draft help, let us know. All of us are in the Discord. If you need help with trades, John and I are in that trades channel all the time. We try to answer everyone. We miss them because there's probably 100 trade questions a day, but we try to hit as many as we can. But please join up. Use code Theory if you want to save some money, and I really appreciate it. We will be back next week. I have an idea for a very good episode. We'll see if I could get these two to agree with it. But on that note, we'll see y'all next week.